My golden child sister purposely scheduled her wedding on our younger sister's graduation day. So I convinced the whole family not to show up for her wedding. I never thought I'd be the one to rip my family apart at the seams, to force them to choose sides. But then again, I never thought my own sister would make me choose between her lavish wedding and our baby sister's life-changing triumph, a moment she fought tooth and nail for. You need to understand how we got here, because context is everything when you're about to hear why I did what I did. Growing up in suburban Ohio, I was the middle kid, always stuck between two sisters who couldn't have been more different. Our house on Maple Drive had 4 bedrooms, but honestly, it often felt like only one truly mattered. Miranda's room was a shrine, her walls overflowing with ribbons and photos, shelves packed with trophies from dance competitions and beauty pageants. Miranda, who was 3 years older than me, practically emerged from the womb expecting applause. She had this effortless way of commanding attention, with her golden hair, a smile that made teachers overlook her tardiness, and a laugh that pulled everyone in like moths to a flame. My parents, Claudia and Raymond Patterson, orbited around her like she was the sun itself. My mom used to tell the story of Miranda's birth like it was a fairy tale. How she was born with a full head of golden hair. How she barely cried. How all the nurses gushed about her beauty. My own birth, by contrast, was a footnote. I arrived quickly, unremarkably, and then just faded into the background of Miranda's toddler tantrums. I remember being 7 and watching Mom spend 3 hours curling Miranda's hair for a school photograph. My picture day came and went with a quick brush and a reminder not to make weird faces. Back then, I didn't question it. Miranda was special. Everyone knew that. My dad, Raymond, was a little gentler in his favoritism, but it was there, simmering under the surface. He coached Miranda's softball team for 2 summers, religiously attending every practice and game. When I expressed interest in the swim team, he offered to drive me to tryouts, but then never made it to a single meet. Work, he'd always say. Yet somehow, work never interfered with Miranda's packed schedule. This dynamic was set so early, I can't remember a time before it. Miranda ruled through sheer force of personality. She'd throw these epic tantrums if she didn't get her way, and our parents quickly learned that giving in was just easier than enduring the storm. By the time she was 10, she'd trained our entire household to revolve around her. Then came Vivian, born 6 years after me, and she came into this world fighting. 2 months premature, she spent her first weeks in the NICU while my parents shuttled between the hospital and Miranda's dance recital. From day one, Vivian learned she'd have to carve out her own space in a family that had already crowned its star. Me? I watched. I observed. I became the translator between 2 sisters who existed in completely different universes, under the same roof. My role solidified early, peacekeeper, mediator, the one who smoothed over tensions and made sure everyone's feelings were managed. Everyone's, that is, except my own. I learned to anticipate our parents' moods, to gauge when to make a request and when to just stay invisible. This hypervigilance served me well out in the world, but it left me perpetually exhausted at home. By 16, I'd perfected the art of observing family dynamics without emotionally participating. Detachment became my survival mechanism. And what I witnessed from that detached vantage point would eventually give me the ammunition I needed to change everything. Miranda floated through high school on a cloud of popularity and parental adoration. She dated the quarterback, was crowned homecoming queen, and my parents threw her a graduation party that the neighbors talked about for years. They rented a tent, hired a DJ, and catered the whole thing from the fancy Italian place downtown. 200 people showed up to celebrate Miranda's completion of basic public education. My graduation, 2 years earlier? A quiet dinner at Applebee's. Just the 5 of us, since Vivian was only 11. Dad checked his watch through most of the meal, and Mom spent half the dinner on her phone arranging something for Miranda's upcoming dance recital. College wasn't Miranda's thing, she said, and our parents nodded sagely, agreeing she was too creative, too free-spirited for traditional education. What they really meant was they'd fund her apartment in Columbus while she figured out her passion, which turned out to be a series of boyfriends and shopping trips. Vivian, meanwhile, struggled. Learning disabilities turned school into a battlefield. Dyslexia made reading a daily humiliation. While Miranda was praised for simply breathing, Vivian was criticized for every B-, every stumbled word during an oral presentation. I remember countless nights, sitting with her, going over flashcards, breaking down sentences, watching her cry from frustration before wiping her tears and trying again. The disparity in our parents' response to academic struggles was staggering. When Miranda failed algebra, they hired a tutor and blamed the teacher for not recognizing her unique learning style. When Vivian struggled with reading, they told her she needed to try harder, to focus more, to stop making excuses. I went with Vivian to her first meeting with a learning specialist when she was 14. Our parents couldn't make it. Miranda had a dentist appointment that somehow required both of them. Sitting in that office, listening to a professional explain that Vivian's brain processed written information differently, that she wasn't lazy or stupid, but working twice as hard as her peers just to keep up. Something fundamental shifted in my understanding of my family. Our parents received the diagnosis with skepticism. Learning disability became another term they used dismissively, as if Vivian had invented dyslexia to garner sympathy. They never sought accommodations, never adjusted their expectations, never acknowledged that their youngest daughter was fighting a battle they couldn't see. Nobody threw Vivian a graduation party. Our parents attended the ceremony, checked their phones throughout, and then took Miranda out to dinner afterward because she'd had a hard week. But Vivian kept going. Community college first, then transferring to Ohio State. For years became 5, then 6, because she had to take lighter course loads to manage her learning differences. She worked 2 jobs to pay for most of it herself, since our parents had mysteriously depleted their college fund, helping Miranda through her various life crises. The jobs were brutal. Vivian worked mornings at a coffee shop, starting at 4 a.m., opening before her classes. Evenings found her at a call center, handling customer complaints until 9 p.m. She scheduled her coursework around these immovable obligations, often studying until midnight before her 4 a.m. alarm dragged her back to consciousness. I offered to help financially more times than I could count. She always refused, pride and stubbornness intertwining in that particular way of hers. The only assistance she'd accept was my time, editing papers, quizzing her for exams, listening as she talked through complex legal concepts that made my head spin. During those years, Miranda went through 3 apartments, 4 boyfriends, and what our parents called her entrepreneurial phase. This phase involved a failed jewelry business funded entirely by our parents, followed by an equally doomed attempt at becoming a life coach. Each failure was met with sympathy, financial bailouts, and reassurances that she'd find her path eventually. Vivian asked our parents for help with textbooks exactly once, during a particularly tight semester when her hours got cut at both jobs. They sent her $200 and reminded her that money was tight, conveniently forgetting the $3,000 they'd just given Miranda to attend a self-improvement retreat in Sedona. When Vivian got into law school, I screamed so loud my neighbors called to check on me. She'd done it. Against every odd, every dismissive comment from our parents, every comparison to Miranda's effortless charm, my baby sister had clawed her way into one of the best law schools in the Midwest. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday in March. Vivian called me sobbing, unable to form complete sentences for the first 5 minutes. When she finally calmed down enough to speak, she told me she'd read the letter 11 times because she kept thinking she'd misunderstood. That night, I drove to her apartment with champagne and her favorite Thai food. We stayed up until 3 a.m. talking about her future, about the career she was building, about all the doors this degree would open. Vivian glowed in a way I'd never seen from her, hope, pride, and disbelief all tangled together. I asked if she'd told our parents yet. Her glow dimmed slightly. She'd called them right after calling me. Their response had been, "Congratulations. That's great, honey," followed by a 20-minute tangent about Miranda's new boyfriend and how this one might actually be marriage material. 20 minutes about Miranda's romantic prospects. Less than 60 seconds about Vivian's acceptance to law school. Our parents' reaction to Vivian's monumental achievement was a lukewarm congratulations, quickly pivoting to Miranda's new boyfriend, Quentin, who came from money and might actually propose this time. Quentin did propose, 8 months ago, with a ring that cost more than Vivian's annual tuition. The engagement party our parents threw rivaled some weddings I'd attended. 200 guests packed into a rented ballroom at a country club our family had no business affording. Miranda wore a custom dress. My mother gave a tearful speech about watching her baby girl find true love, and my father actually cried during his toast. Vivian attended in a dress she bought at a consignment shop, standing in the corner with me, watching our parents lavish attention on Miranda's latest milestone. At one point, a distant cousin approached Vivian and asked if she was still in school. Law school, Vivian corrected quietly. I graduate next year. The cousin nodded absently, already scanning the room for someone more interesting to talk to. Miranda, meanwhile, glowed under the attention, already discussing destination ceremonies and designer gowns. Vivian, as usual, smiled and congratulated her sister, while I seethed in the corner, nursing a glass of wine and fantasizing about telling everyone exactly what I thought of our family's priorities. The date for Miranda's wedding was set for October 15th. I marked it in my calendar, already dreading the event, but prepared to show up and play my role as the dutiful middle sister. Then came March and Vivian's law school announced their commencement date, October 15th. My stomach dropped when she told me. We were sitting in her tiny apartment, surrounded by textbooks and empty coffee cups, when she mentioned it casually, like she'd already accepted the inevitable. Her voice carried that particular flatness I'd learned to recognize over the years, the sound of Vivian preparing herself for disappointment. I immediately pulled out my phone, checking the calendar I'd marked months ago. The date glared back at me, a confirmation of what I already knew. Vivian watched my expression shift. She shrugged, a gesture carrying 27 years of resignation. It is what it is, she said. Miranda set her date first. I can't exactly ask a wedding to move for my graduation. I asked, why the hell not? She just looked at me with those tired eyes, and I understood. She'd spent her entire life being the flexible one, the accommodating one, the one whose needs could always be postponed for someone else's convenience. The idea of asking for priority didn't even occur to her as a possibility. That night, after I left her apartment, I sat in my car for 30 minutes, just thinking. The ceremony was 7 months away. Venues could be changed, caterers rescheduled, invitations reprinted. Nothing about this situation was immovable, except the people who refused to move. Vivian would be the first person in our family to earn a graduate degree. The first to achieve something beyond high school, or a brief stint at community college. She'd done it while working, while managing a learning disability, while being consistently overlooked by the very people who were supposed to champion her. I called my mother that night. Claudia's voice was distracted when she answered, already talking to someone in the background about floral arrangements. I could hear Miranda's voice too, discussing pie versus rose options with characteristic intensity. When I explained the conflict, silence stretched across the line. Finally, Mom sighed. These things happen, she said. Vivian will understand. There will be other celebrations for her, but Miranda only gets one wedding day. I pointed out that Vivian only got one graduation day, that this wasn't some birthday party that could be rescheduled, that this moment represented years of struggle and triumph. My mother's response crystallized everything I'd always known but never fully accepted. She told me Miranda had been planning this wedding for months, that we can't ask her to change the date because of Vivian's school schedule, and that Vivian is used to being flexible. Used to being flexible. The words echoed in my head long after I hung up. The phrase burrowed into my brain like a splinter. Used to being flexible. As if Vivian's lifetime of accommodation was a character trait rather than a survival adaptation. As if being consistently overlooked had simply made her better at being overlooked. I spent the next 2 days in a fog, replaying the conversation. Replaying decades of similar conversations. Every time Vivian had stepped aside. Every time her needs had been deemed less urgent, less important, less worthy of consideration. Then I did something I'd never done before. I started making a list. I called Miranda next, hoping that maybe, just maybe, sisterly love would prevail where parental fairness had failed. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright and bubbly. The sound of traffic suggested she was driving, probably to another dress fitting or cake tasting. Oh, I know about the conflict, she said almost cheerfully. It's such a bummer, but these things happen, right? I'm sure someone can film Vivian's graduation for her to watch later. The casualness of it stunned me. Film it for her to watch later. As if 6 years of blood, sweat, and tears could be adequately captured on someone's iPhone. As if witnessing the moment through a screen was equivalent to living it. I asked if she could move the wedding by even a week. Just 7 days in either direction would solve everything. Miranda's laugh was light, dismissive. The venue is booked. The caterers are scheduled. Invitations have been sent. Besides, October 15th is our anniversary of when Quentin and I first said, "I love you." It has to be that day. I pressed, "What about Vivian's graduation? All those years of work." "She'll have her whole career to celebrate," Miranda replied. "I only get one wedding." I pushed harder. Did Miranda realize this was the first graduate degree in our family? Did she understand what Vivian had overcome to reach this point? Miranda's tone shifted slightly, an edge creeping in. "Look, I'm sorry about the timing, but I'm not changing my wedding date because Vivian chose a law school with an inconvenient graduation schedule. That's not my responsibility." Chose a law school. As if Vivian had multiple offers to select from, as if she deliberately picked the one that would create a scheduling conflict. I hung up without saying goodbye. The next few weeks were a masterclass in family dysfunction. Every conversation with our parents circled back to Miranda's wedding preparations. Color schemes, seating charts, rehearsal dinner locations. Vivian's upcoming graduation became the elephant in every room, acknowledged only when I brought it up, and quickly dismissed. Our Sunday dinners, once a tradition I'd actually enjoyed, became exercises in endurance. Miranda would arrive with fabric swatches and centerpiece options, monopolizing the conversation while Vivian picked at her food in silence. Our mother cooed over every detail. Our father nodded along approvingly, and I watched my youngest sister shrink further into herself with each passing week. At one of these dinners, about a month after I'd learned about the conflict, I made a deliberate attempt to redirect the conversation. "Vivian has finals coming up," I announced during a rare lull. "Some of the toughest exams in legal education." Our mother glanced at Vivian briefly. "That's nice, honey. Are you prepared?" Before Vivian could respond, Miranda launched into a crisis about her maid of honor's bridesmaid dress alterations. The moment passed, swallowed by more urgent wedding concerns. Driving home that night, I called Vivian to check on her. "I'm fine," she said, which we both knew was a lie. "I've been fine my whole life. Why would anything be different now?" Aunt Sylvia, our mother's sister, called to discuss what she should wear to the wedding. When I mentioned the conflict with Vivian's graduation, she paused. "That's unfortunate timing," she said carefully. "But weddings are such important family events." I asked her what graduate school completion ceremonies were. Then her hesitation told me everything. But Aunt Sylvia's hesitation also revealed something else, a flicker of discomfort. The briefest pause that suggested she recognized something wasn't quite right about this situation, even if she couldn't articulate what. I filed that observation away for later. Grandma Edith, the family matriarch at 82, was the first person to genuinely seem troubled by the situation. She'd always had a soft spot for Vivian, perhaps recognizing a kindred spirit in someone who'd had to fight for recognition. "That doesn't seem right," she murmured when I explained the situation over tea at her house. "Vivian worked so hard." I agreed with her. "But your mother has her heart set on seeing Miranda get married," Grandma continued. She paused, then added, "I suppose we all do." Her voice carried an uncertainty I'd rarely heard from her. I leaned forward. "Do we though? Or have we just always assumed Miranda's events are the ones that matter?" Grandma Edith set down her teacup, studying me with sharp eyes that age hadn't dimmed. "You've always been the one who noticed things," she said quietly. "Even as a child, you watched everything. Saw what others missed. What do you see now?" I asked. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised me. "I see Vivian holding herself so carefully at family gatherings, like she's trying not to take up too much space. Like she's afraid of being too much trouble." My throat tightened. "When did she start doing that?" Grandma asked. "When did she learn that she needed to be small?" Even Grandma Edith, who saw Vivian more clearly than anyone else in the family, defaulted to Miranda. The pattern was too ingrained, too comfortable to disrupt. Vivian called me one night in April. Her voice thick with tears she was trying to hide. "I'm not going to walk at graduation," she said. "I'll just get my diploma mailed." The words hit me like a physical blow. I demanded to know why. "Because if I make everyone choose, they'll choose Miranda, and I can't watch that happen," she replied. "I'd rather just quietly get my degree and not make it a thing." I told her that this was absurd, that she'd earned the right to walk across that stage. "Have I though?" Her laugh was hollow. "According to everyone in this family, my graduation is just an inconvenience that conflicts with something actually important." I asked her to tell me about her first week of law school, to describe what it felt like walking into those classrooms, surrounded by people who'd never been told they were stupid, who'd never had to fight for every grade. Vivian was quiet for several seconds. "Terrifying," she finally admitted. "I sat in the back of every lecture for the first month, because I was afraid I'd get called on and everyone would realize I didn't belong there. Imposter syndrome like you wouldn't believe. But you stayed." "I stayed." She paused. "Every time I understood a concept, every time I participated in class and actually contributed something worthwhile, it felt like proving something. Not just to myself, but to everyone who ever looked at me like I was slow." I asked her who she wanted in that audience when she walked across the stage. Her voice cracked slightly. "Everyone. I want everyone to see that I made it. That the girl who couldn't read until 3rd grade is now a lawyer. Then that's what you're going to get," I promised. I stayed on the phone with her for 2 hours that night. By the end, I'd convinced her not to give up her ceremony. What I didn't tell her was that I'd also made a decision of my own. If my family wouldn't value Vivian's achievement, I would make them. The campaign started subtly. I began calling relatives, not to argue against Miranda's wedding, but simply to share information about Vivian's graduation. My approach was methodical. Years of watching family dynamics had taught me how each relative operated, what motivated them, what appeals would resonate. This wasn't manipulation in the traditional sense. I wasn't inventing grievances or spreading lies. I was simply shining light on truths that had always existed in shadow. "Did you know she's the first person in our family to get a graduate degree?" I'd ask casually. "And she did it while working full-time and managing dyslexia. Her professors say she's one of the most determined students they've ever had." With Uncle Preston, I emphasized the professional achievement. He'd always valued hard work and education, even if he'd been too distant to notice Vivian's particular struggles. With Aunt Sylvia, I played up the emotional angle. I described how Vivian had cried when she got her acceptance letter. How she thanked me for all those nights of flashcard sessions. How she'd already been accepted to a prestigious firm for after graduation. My mother always made sure. "I felt seen at family events when we were growing up," Aunt Sylvia said slowly during one of our conversations. "But I watched how your mother treated Vivian compared to Miranda. It reminded me of things I'd rather not remember. Small things, but they accumulate." I mentioned that Vivian had never been the one they showed up for. Sylvia went quiet on the line. "I thought about your grandmother's nursing school graduation," she eventually said. "The one Grandpa skipped. She's mentioned it exactly twice in my entire life, both times after a glass of wine. Those wounds don't heal just because time passes." With Grandma Edith, I was direct. I told her that Vivian needed her there, that she needed someone from this family to show up for her. Grandma was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. "I've been thinking about this since you first told me," she admitted. "Your grandfather didn't come to my nursing school graduation. He had a poker game with his friends. Said I'd understand. I've never forgotten how that felt. Standing there looking for his face in the crowd and not finding it." I asked what she was going to do. "I'm going to Vivian's graduation," she said firmly. "Miranda will have plenty of people at her wedding. Vivian needs to know that someone in this family thinks she matters." Grandma Edith's decision created ripples. When she mentioned her choice to Aunt Sylvia, explaining her reasoning, something shifted. The shift was seismic in its subtlety. Grandma Edith was the moral center of our family. Her choices carried a weight that our parents never had. When she declared her intention to attend Vivian's graduation, she wasn't just making a personal decision, she was granting permission for others to question the family hierarchy. Sylvia called me 2 days later. She was planning to go to Vivian's graduation, too. I've missed too many important moments for the people who didn't demand attention, she said. Time to start making different choices. Uncle Preston followed suit after I sent him an article about the challenges faced by students with learning disabilities, along with Vivian's transcript, showing her steady improvement from C's to A's over 6 years of determined effort. He called me the same evening he received the email. 6 years, he repeated. She took 6 years to finish her undergraduate degree. I explained about the 2 jobs, the lighter course loads, the learning accommodations she'd finally gotten in college that she'd never received in high school. And your parents never mentioned this to me, he said. They never mentioned Vivian much at all, I replied. Preston was quiet for a moment. I failed chemistry twice in college, he admitted. Had to retake it over a summer, while all my friends were interning. It was humiliating at the time. Probably the hardest thing I'd done up to that point. Imagine feeling that way about reading, I said. About every single assignment, every textbook chapter, every email. That's what Vivian lived with. This kid's got grit, he said. More than anyone gave her credit for. I'll be at her graduation. Garrett, a cousin close to my age who'd always gotten along with both sisters, was harder to convince. He genuinely liked Miranda and felt torn. I took him out for drinks and laid out the history. Every missed Vivian recital that coincided with something Miranda needed. Every graduation party that wasn't thrown. Every time Vivian's achievements had been minimized to avoid overshadowing Miranda's spotlight. We talked for nearly 3 hours that night. Garrett asked questions I hadn't anticipated, pushed back on some of my characterizations, played devil's advocate in ways that forced me to examine my own motivations. Are you sure this isn't just about you being angry at Miranda? He asked at one point. The question stung, because it was fair. Maybe partly, I admitted. But mostly, it's about Vivian. She spent her entire life being told, through actions if not words, that she's less important. This is a chance to show her that's not true. Garrett swirled his beer thoughtfully. I never really noticed, he admitted. Miranda's just so present, you know? She fills up every room. I asked him who needed him at their graduation. He chose Vivian. One by one, I watched my family members wake up to a pattern they'd never examined. Decades of unconscious preference, of attention flowing to whoever demanded it loudest, of assuming that the quiet child didn't need support because she didn't ask for it. By September, the numbers had shifted dramatically. Of the 40 family members invited to both events, 32 had quietly RSVP'd Vivian's graduation instead of Miranda's wedding. The shift hadn't happened overnight. Throughout the summer, I'd had dozens of conversations, answered countless questions, addressed concerns and skepticism from relatives who'd never questioned our family's dynamics before. Some conversations were harder than others. Quentin's mother called me in July, having heard through the grapevine about the family division. She was polite but clearly displeased, suggesting I was being childish and selfish by creating drama before her son's wedding. I explained the situation from my perspective, focusing on facts rather than emotions. The timeline of both events, Vivian's academic journey, the family's historical treatment of both sisters. She listened, then said, I understand your concerns, but perhaps there are better ways to address family imbalances than boycotting a wedding. I told her I wasn't asking anyone to boycott anything. I was simply ensuring people had complete information before making their choice. The woman who would become Miranda's mother-in-law had nothing to say to that. I waited for the explosion. I didn't have to wait long. Miranda called our mother, screaming about RSVPs. Half the family had declined, citing prior commitments. When pressed, the truth emerged. You convinced them. Miranda shouted into my voicemail. I know you did this. You turned everyone against me. I called her back, keeping my voice calm. I told her I didn't turn anyone against her. She accused me of making them choose Vivian. I responded that I simply told them the truth about what Vivian had accomplished and let them make their own decisions. My sister's fury was incandescent. She called me jealous, bitter, pathetic. She accused me of sabotaging her happiness because I couldn't stand to see her succeed. The voicemail she left was 7 minutes long. I listened to it once, then saved it. Part of me wondered if I might need evidence someday of who Miranda really was beneath the golden exterior. Her accusations ranged from the predictable to the bizarre. Apparently, I'd been plotting against her since childhood, nursing ancient resentments about bedroom sizes and birthday presents. Apparently, I'd always been jealous of her looks, her popularity, her ability to attract attention without effort. Nowhere in her 7-minute rant did she mention Vivian's name. The conflict wasn't about our sister's graduation being overshadowed. In Miranda's mind, this was entirely about me attacking her. I let her vent, then asked a question of my own. Did you ever consider moving your wedding even once? Did the thought cross your mind that maybe, just maybe, Vivian deserves one day where the family shows up for her? Miranda's silence stretched for 10 seconds, then she hung up. Our parents' reaction was predictably dramatic. My father, Raymond, typically passive in family conflicts, actually raised his voice during our phone call. "You've ruined your sister's wedding," he accused. "Half the family isn't coming because of whatever poison you've been spreading." I corrected him. Half the family decided to attend a graduate school graduation instead, because they finally realized that Vivian's achievements mattered just as much as Miranda's. He sputtered, caught off guard by my calm response. "This isn't about who matters more," he insisted. "It's about respecting commitments. People committed to attend Miranda's wedding." I asked when anyone in this family had ever committed to attending Vivian's events. The silence on the line was deafening. My mother, Claudia, was more wounded than angry. "How could you do this to us? To your sister? We've been planning this wedding for months." I asked, "How could you do this to Vivian?" Silence. "She's worked harder than anyone in this family," I continued. "She's overcome obstacles that would have broken most people. And she did it without your support, without your attention, without anyone ever throwing her a party or calling her special. All she wanted was for someone to show up for her on the most important day of her academic life. And you couldn't even do that." My mother started crying. "My father told me I wasn't welcome at Miranda's wedding." I said, "Fine, but I hadn't been planning to attend anyway." The line went silent for several seconds before my mother found her voice again. "You're destroying this family," she said, her voice trembling. "No," I replied. "I'm just redistributing attention more fairly. For once, Vivian gets to matter. If that destroys this family, maybe the family was built on something that shouldn't have existed in the first place." I hung up before either of them could respond. The wedding went forward on October 15th. Miranda walked down the aisle toward Quentin with approximately 35 guests in attendance, mostly from his side of the family. Our parents were there, of course, along with a handful of relatives who either hadn't been aware of the graduation conflict or had chosen loyalty to the golden child over fairness. I heard it was beautiful in its diminished way. The venue looked empty with so few people, the reception tables half-filled. Miranda cried during the ceremony, but not all the tears were happy ones. A cousin who'd attended texted me photos afterward. The professional shots would hide the empty chairs, the rearranged seating that tried to disguise how sparse the crowd was, but the candid photos told the truth. Miranda's side of the church was a patchwork of gaps where family should have been sitting. I felt a complicated mix of emotions looking at those images. Vindication, certainly, but also a pang of sadness for the sister who genuinely couldn't understand why people had chosen differently. Across the state, in the auditorium where Vivian received her Juris Doctor degree, 32 members of our family sat in the audience. I was in the front row with Grandma Edith, who gripped my hand when Vivian's name was called. She walked across that stage with her head high, looking out at a crowd that finally, for once in her life, had shown up for her. The moment her name was called, our section erupted. Grandma Edith, Uncle Preston, Aunt Sylvia, Garrett, and 24 other relatives who had chosen to witness this instead of Miranda's wedding. They cheered. They clapped. They made enough noise that people turned to look. Vivian paused on stage, diploma in hand, scanning the audience until she found us. Even from that distance, I could see her composure waver. Her smile wobbled, then stretched wider than I'd ever seen it. She raised her diploma slightly, a small salute to the people who'd shown up. I've never seen my sister smile like that. Afterward, at the celebration I'd organized at a restaurant downtown, Vivian made a speech that still makes me cry when I think about it. "I spent most of my life believing I was less important than my sister," she began. "Not because anyone told me directly, but because of the 1,000 small moments where I came second, where my achievements were footnotes to someone else's story. She looked around the room at the relatives who had chosen to be there. Today, for the first time, I feel like I matter. Not because of this degree, but because you all showed me that my hard work was worth witnessing, that my struggles were worth acknowledging, that I was worth choosing. Her eyes found mine. Especially you. You've been choosing me my whole life, even when nobody else did. I wouldn't be standing here without you. I wanted to tell her that wasn't true, that she'd accomplished this entirely through her own determination. But I just nodded, tears streaming down my face, accepting the gratitude she needed to express. Later, she would tell me about the moment she'd seen our section of the auditorium. She'd expected maybe 5 or 6 people. Finding 32 had nearly broken her composure completely. I kept counting, she admitted. I thought I was seeing wrong. That maybe some strangers had sat in our section. I told her they all came for her. Her voice cracked. I know. That's what finally made me believe it might be real. Grandma Edith cried openly. Aunt Sylvia hugged Vivian so hard she lifted her off the ground. Uncle Preston, gruff and reserved my entire life, told her he was proud of her. It was everything Vivian had never had and always deserved. The restaurant celebration lasted 4 hours. Relatives cycled through conversations with Vivian, asking about her classes, her job prospects, her plans for the future. Each interaction was a small correction of years of oversight. Uncle Preston cornered me near the end of the evening. You did good work, he said gruffly, taking the time to make everyone understand. I told him the facts spoke for themselves. Facts don't speak for themselves, he countered. Someone has to present them. He paused. Vivian's lucky to have you in her corner. Grandma Edith echoed the sentiment. I helped her to her car at the end of the night. You broke a pattern that's been holding this family back for decades, she said. Your parents may never forgive you, but Vivian will never forget. The aftermath has been complicated, as family fallout always is. Miranda barely speaks to me, and when she does, it's with a coldness that makes it clear she'll never forgive what she sees as my betrayal. Her honeymoon photos appeared on social media 2 weeks after the wedding. Beautiful beaches, expensive restaurants, Miranda and Quentin looking happy. I wondered if she'd managed to put the wedding behind her, or if the sting of those empty chairs still haunted her. 3 months in, she posted about being blessed with such a supportive husband and in-laws. Conspicuously absent from her gratitude was any mention of her own family. Our parents have been forced into an uncomfortable reckoning. With so many family members having witnessed the pattern for themselves, they can no longer pretend that everything was always equal, that Vivian was simply less needy rather than less prioritized. My mother called me a month after both events. Her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. I didn't realize, she said. I didn't see how different it was for her. I asked if she saw it now. A long pause. Ben, I'm trying to. It's not an apology. Not really, but it's a start. Our father has remained more distant. He sends occasional texts about neutral topics, but hasn't directly addressed what happened. Part of me understands. Admitting you favored one child over another means confronting something fundamentally ugly about yourself as a parent. Denial is easier, but easier isn't always available anymore. Too many relatives witnessed the pattern for themselves. Too many conversations happened that can't be unspoken. Thanksgiving was held at Uncle Preston's house this year, to avoid the complications of choosing between our parents' house and anywhere else. Vivian sat at the main table, while Miranda and Quentin made excuses not to attend. Vivian started her job at the law firm in January. She's thriving, finally, in an environment that recognizes her intelligence and work ethic. We have dinner together every week, and she's slowly working through years of feeling invisible. Her apartment now displays her diploma prominently, something she admitted she initially felt strange about. I wasn't going to hang it up, she told me during one of our weekly dinners. It felt like bragging. I asked what she felt about it now. She glanced at the framed document on her wall. Now it feels like proof, she said. Proof that I did something everyone said I couldn't. Proof that the people who believed in me were right. Some people have asked me if I regret what I did. If I feel guilty for diminishing my sister's wedding, for forcing the family to make a choice that created such division. Here's my answer. Miranda had a lifetime of choices made in her favor. Every time resources were allocated, attention was distributed, or priorities were set, she came first. Her wedding was going to be beautiful regardless. The difference between 40 guests and 80 guests is just a matter of scale, not of support or love. Vivian, on the other hand, had never been chosen. Not once in her entire life had the family shown up for her the way they showed up for Miranda. Her graduation wasn't just about a degree. It was about finally being seen. The family members who chose to attend her graduation didn't do it because I manipulated them. They did it because when I laid out the history, they recognized something they'd been complicit in. They made a choice to do better. That's not sabotage. That's accountability. Miranda will probably never understand why what she did was wrong. She spent too long believing that her needs naturally supersede everyone else's, a belief our parents cultivated from her earliest days. In her mind, she's the victim of a jealous sister who couldn't let her have one perfect day. She doesn't see that she was asking Vivian to sacrifice her only perfect day so Miranda could have another one. The relationships in my family are different now. Some of them are broken in ways that might never heal, but others are stronger than they've ever been. Vivian has connections with relatives who finally see her clearly. Grandma Edith calls her every week. Uncle Preston has become an unexpected mentor as she navigates her legal career. We lost some things when I made this choice. But we gained something important too. The truth. Families often operate on unspoken agreements, hierarchies that everyone maintains without examining. The golden child gets what they want, and everyone else adjusts. It's comfortable in its way, because it eliminates conflict. Someone has already been designated as most important, so decisions are easy. Breaking that pattern is painful. It requires everyone to confront their complicity, to acknowledge that their passivity enabled injustice. It would have been easier for me to stay quiet, to let Vivian sacrifice her graduation, to maintain the family peace that only ever benefited one person. But easier isn't the same as right. I watched my baby sister walk across that stage, Grandma Edith's hand in mine, surrounded by family members who finally chose to see her. She'd spent 6 years fighting for that moment, and she deserved every second of recognition. Miranda had her wedding. Vivian had her graduation. Both events happened. Both sisters had their day. The only difference is that this time, the family's attention was distributed fairly. And if that makes me the villain in Miranda's story, so be it. I can live with being the person who finally said enough. Who refused to let the pattern continue. Who showed my family that choosing the loud child over the quiet one isn't neutral. It's a choice with consequences. Vivian matters. Her achievements matter. Her pain at being overlooked matters. I just made sure everyone else finally understood that, too. Some days I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed silent. Vivian would have skipped her graduation, collected her diploma by mail, and watched Miranda glow at a wedding full of family support. The pattern would have continued unbroken and unexamined. Instead, my baby sister knows what it feels like to be chosen. To have people show up. To matter. No matter what else I've lost, I will never regret giving her that. The last time I saw Miranda was at our father's birthday dinner, 3 months after both events. She sat at the opposite end of the table, engaging only with our parents and Quentin, pretending I didn't exist. Vivian sat next to me, newly confident in a way that transformed her entire presence. She spoke about her cases, laughed with Grandma Edith, accepted compliments gracefully instead of deflecting them. At one point, our eyes met across the table, Miranda and me. Hers were hard, unforgiving. Mine probably looked tired. This rift between us may never heal. And I've accepted that. But then I glanced at Vivian, animated and happy, finally comfortable taking up space in a family that had made her feel invisible for 27 years. And I knew with absolute certainty that I'd do it all again. Every phone call, every difficult conversation, every moment of doubt about whether I had the right to interfere. Worth it. All of it for her. Because that's what family should be. Not reflexive loyalty to whoever demands it loudest, but conscious choice to support whoever needs it most. Miranda had our parents' devotion from her first breath. Vivian had to earn every scrap of recognition she ever received. Now she knows that recognition wasn't just from me. It was from Grandma Edith, Aunt Sylvia, Uncle Preston, Garrett, and 30 other people who looked at the situation clearly and decided to show up for her. The golden child had her wedding. It was smaller than planned, but it happened. The forgotten child had her graduation. It was witnessed and celebrated by more family than any event in her life. And me? I have something better than being liked by everyone. I have my baby sister thriving for the first time in her life, knowing that she was worth fighting for. That's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.